Hello and welcome friends, I am That Happy Viking and I would like to present to you my set review of Ikoria for Gentry. If you have no idea what Gentry is, check the description below this video for more information. In this episode, we will be looking at the black cards. First up we have Bastion of Remembrance, a 3-mana enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white human creature. And whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So I already mentioned black-white aristocrats. We're definitely going to be looking at this card to add it into it. If you're not very hard focused on sacrificing cards yourself, I don't think this is good enough though. Okay, Blitzleech is a 6-mana 5/2 with flash. When it enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls gets -2/-2 and remove all counters from that creature. A really interesting effect to have, especially considering it's a common, but the only creature this is really relevant against would be Najani's Pridemate, I guess. And at 6 mana, an answer to Ajani's Pridemate is probably too late. Bloodcurdle is a 4-mana instant that destroys target creature, and then you get to put a menace counter on a creature you control. Solid removal spell, but unless that menace counter is something that you really need, you have way better options as a removal spell in common and black, so I don't expect to see it played. Bootnipper is a 2/1 for 2 that enters the battlefield with Death Touch or a lifelink. Now, this is a really interesting card, I think, because the choice between Death Touch and lifelink is dependent on what your opponent has. So this gives you a very flexible answer against aggro decks, in which case you might want to get lifelink on it, or mid-range decks, in which case you want Death Touch on it. That said, as a 2-mana 2/1, I do wonder what kind of defensive oriented deck, because choosing for Death Touch or lifelink is rather defense oriented, will want this. There is a Death Touch Matters deck somewhere with the uncommon Vraska, but or Savra. I don't remember if it's Vraska or Savra. But even there, I don't really expect to see this, which is unfortunate because it has that nice flexibility. Brushmeat Poacher is a 4-mana 2/4 that can sacrifice another creature for 1 mana and tap. You gain life equal to that creature's toughness, and you get to draw a card. At common, this is a other repeatable sacrifice engine, but it requires tapping, so that's pretty rough. We have what are probably better options with the 2/3 for 3s that require 3 mana but not tapping to draw a card. Here you gain life gain on top of a slightly bigger body, but I don't think that's worth it. The jump from 3 mana to 4 mana is pretty big as well. The jump from 2 mana to 3 mana isn't that extreme. The way Magic decks are built, you will most of the time have 3 lands on turn 3, but that guarantee goes out the window with your 4th land, just statistically speaking. So just know that the jump from 3 to 4 is also very, very relevant here. And we get Call of the Death Dweller. Returns up to 2 target creature cards with total converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard. Put a Death Touch counter on either of them, then put a menace counter on either of them. This is maybe the best black uncommon, and I'm being very careful here because we're only at C in the set. In the aristocrat decks, a lot of the things that you want to be doing are centered around having something in play that triggers off things dying. One of the best things you can have in play at the time is a Mayhem Devil. So whenever you sacrifice something, it deals 1 damage to any target. This reanimates your Mayhem Devil and gives it Death Touch, so that 1 damage is going to zap and kill no matter how big the creature is. If you don't have your Mayhem Devil on the board, then this can bring back a 1 and a 2 drop for you. Suddenly your cat comes back because you played it out early without sacrifice protection. Excuse me, sacrifice protection up, plus a 2 drop of your liking. Could be a burglar rat, it could be your priest of forgotten gods. There's so many build around me things that can that make this card interesting. The fact we already have a shell in which it's really good makes me sure that this is going to be played and will be played in other shells as well in the future. There's plenty of decks that have creatures they want to reanimate that are cheap because you want to take advantage of certain interactions or certain abilities on them, and then having that Death Touch and or Menace counter added on top of it can really put certain creatures over the top. So definitely one of my selections for meta game influencing cards here. Cavern Whisper is a common 5 mana 4/4, mutate 4, so we get the discount with Menace. Whenever this creature mutates, each opponent discards a card. I have been thinking about this card in the black disruption shells. So the cards that have that burglar rat and that plague bearer and then a Cavern Whisperer. What they usually miss a little bit is finishing speed and finishing power. This adds a little bit of that disruption and a little bit of that finishing power and a little bit of evasion to those decks, but I'm not sure if that is going to be enough because it needs to slot in onto something that they already have, and that's going to be really rough for those decks. I wouldn't be surprised if people find space for this card, but I don't really expect it. Chittering Harvester is a 6 mana 4/6 with mutate 5. So we get the discount again. Whenever this creature mutates, each opponent sacrifices a creature. This can be insanely good, but it is conditional, and with so many, especially with Pharika's Libation in the format for a couple of months now, a lot of people have added Pharika's Libation protection to their decks in the form of incidental tokens or being aware to have something else on the board to protect against that sacrifice effect, that I don't think currently this is worth an uncommon slot. That might change if the metagame shifts a little bit, but 5 mana to hope for a sacrifice effect, even if you get a 4/6 out of it, is just not what you want to be doing in competitive Gentry. Corpse Churn. Put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand at a 2 mana instant common card. Corpse Churn is part of the engine in the graveyard interaction decks that we've seen centered around Golgari and Sultai colors. It's underwhelming if you don't have anything set up to take advantage of it, or a way to fill your graveyard elsewhere. So at some point this becomes a tutor card for whatever you need. If you have enough self-mill and you manage to dump half your deck in the graveyard, there's going to be some really juicy targets in there. So I totally expect those disrupt, regrow, graveyard using decks to make a resurgence with some other cards that we're going to be seeing later, and Corpse Churn is going to be played in those. And if nobody does it, then I'll be the one making that deck just to make sure I don't make a fool of myself. Dark Bargain is a 4 mana common instant. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Dark Bargain deals 2 damage to you. Go away. It slots into the same deck, but going from 2 mana to 4 mana is a pretty big deal. This one does give you card advantage because you get 2 cards back. But I feel like there's better things you can do or should be doing with that amount of mana in that deck. Usually the card advantage in that deck comes when you really start grinding through that graveyard of yours, not by casting spells that draw you extra cards. Deadweight is a reprint, is currently played, so expect to see it played in the future. That was easy. Dirge Bat, 4 mana, 3/3, mutate 6, so this one costs a chunk more to mutate. Flash and Flying. Whenever this creature mutates, destroy target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. So this is a 6 mana removal spell that requires you to have a creature in play, or a 4 mana combat trick that is a surprise blocker that you then afterwards can start mutating with cheaper effects to get that mutate trigger. That second scenario sounds a lot better, but it requires a mutate heavier deck, because you're not going to be likely mutating for the 6 mana cost. You're more likely to play it as a 4/4 blocker, get the surprise kill in through that, and then mutate onto it afterwards to take advantage of the ability. So you need more mutates for that. With how mutate is set up currently, it seems like the ones focused on aggro strategies are better. So having a very defensive oriented one like this, almost a control oriented one, will struggle a little bit, but you can, with the blue ones and with the cost reduction blue 2-drop, you can go a black-blue mutate that aims to have a slower, more evasive game plan. And in that deck, this would be a card for sure. All these deck ideas. Okay. Next up, Durable Coilbug. 2 mana, common, 2/2. For 5 mana, return Durable Coilbug from your graveyard to your hand. Wait, for 1 mana, we have Sanatorium Skeleton, which is a 1/2 that returns to our hand for 3 mana. That like, you're paying 3 more mana just to get 1 power? No. Like, you need a very specific set of circumstances to ever consider playing this in your deck over Sanatorium Skeleton. Just go for Sani Skelly. He's bro. Duskfang Mentor, the 3rd one in the cycle of creatures that have that ability counter. When it enters the battlefield, you get to put a lifelink counter, in this case, on target non-human creature you control, and then you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with lifelink. We already mentioned that the white one with Vigilance is a bit iffy. It doesn't really help a particular strategy. The fact that you have the stress between having creatures with and without the ability to make the first ability relevant is a bit awkward. The blue one works with Flying, where there is a scenario where you just don't care about the activated ability, the triggered ability, and go all in on the activated one. And I feel like we're closer to the first one than the white one than the blue one with lifelink here. while it's interesting to have lifelink on creatures, currently the deck that's focused on lifelink is white, has those Ajani's Pridemates that we talked about before, but don't forget we have a black Ajani's Pridemate with flying as well. I forgot the name right now. It's a vampire, so you could try and go the same sort of deck with black around it, so you give up some of that protection that you have in white, but in exchange you get removal and discard disruption. Might be something you want to look into. Seems unlikely to be good enough to compete currently because there's some really strong streamlined decks in the metagame, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen. Easy Prey, 2 mana instant, destroy target creature with converted mana cost 2 or less with cycling 2. A really strong card, but it doesn't help you catch up. It's an uncommon, and the cycling might make it more interesting, but I think most players will just want to play a common early game answer to small creatures over Easy Prey. I'll be very surprised to see this played. Extinction Event is a 4 mana sorcery. It's a rare, choose odd or even, exile each creature with converted mana cost of the chosen value. 0 is even. Ooh. I mean, there's 2 companions that limit you to a certain converted mana cost. One says you can only play even ones, the other one says you can only play uneven ones, and both of them are black. One is black-red hybrid, the other one is black-blue hybrid. So it might fit in either of those, but outside of that, I don't see this being played. And even in those decks, you probably have better options. So nope, don't play. Gloom Pangolin is a 3 mana 1/5. That's I would say unplayable. Even if you want a high toughness defender in black, there are better options at lower mana costs. Grimdancer. Grimdancer enters the battlefield with your choice of 2 different counters on it from among Menace, Death Touch, and Lifelink. Now, remember Bootnipper, we were excited about getting the choice between Death Touch and Lifelink. The fact that we're adding Menace here increases the value of this creature by so much. Death Touch with Menace means you'll be killing 2 creatures in combat for people to interact with this guy. Death Touch and Lifelink means that you will always, no matter what, have a positive trade, at least go 1-for-1 plus that 3 life in almost any non-first strike scenario that happens. On top of that, its mana cost is black 1, which makes it really interesting for devotion decks, and the Death Touch, the Menace Lifelink combo really makes a nice synergy together with Grey Merchant of Asphodel. So I do expect to see this card around, but I do have the feeling that it's somewhat overrated at this point. Heartless Act is a 2 mana instant, uncommon. Choose 1, destroy target creature with no counters on it, or remove up to 3 counters from target creature. So this is more flexible than, what was it? Easy Prey? Easy Prey, yeah. It's a more flexible removal spell than Easy Prey. Not that many big creatures will end up having counters as well. And removing 3 counters from most creatures might kill them. The way the metagame is currently set up, this would be a really good card to add to it. And I still think it's good enough to be merited some slots in your deck. But don't forget the remove 3 counters. It can also remove ability counters. So that makes it somewhat more relevant. The problem, however, is that I think that most mutate decks will be featuring mechanics that give +1/+1 counters whenever they mutate, and that's going to be a glaring black hole in what this card can profitably deal with. So take that into account. A murder is probably a better choice than this. And it's uncommon, where murder is a common. So I don't like in the metagame before Ikoria, this would have been insane. In the metagame after Ikoria, I expect this to be somewhat underwhelming. Hunted Nightmare is a 3-mana 4/5 menace. That's broken. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent puts a death touch counter on a creature they control. So you upgrade your opponent's creature. They will have to double block to get rid of your Hunted Nightmare. And at 3 mana, you're hoping to play this early so that the creature they're putting it on is small enough that you're killing both of those blockers, even if they ever get to 2. On top of that, you're in black, the one color that has the easiest time getting rid of creatures, even in groups. So I think this is a really strong card. It has double black in its cost again, so it makes it good in the devotion decks. But it doesn't really have that game finishing power you want from a rare. I know there's people that are more in the camp of making sure that your rare is somewhere inside your basic strategy rather than a curve topper to finish games with. And those people will be looking at this very strongly and will win games off the pressure that this puts on the table. It's just, for me personally, that feels like a wrong use of a rare. I totally anticipate losing games to it though. So come and prove me wrong. Insatiable Hemophage is a 4-mana 3/3. Mutates for 3, so we get the discount, we get death touch. Whenever this creature mutates, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. Effects that trigger off the number of times a creature has mutated need to be really, really, really good. Why is that? Because when mutating, you're turning multiple of your cards into a single permanent that can be dealt with a single removal spell. So draining for 2, a total of 3, so adding the second mutate is most likely not worth taking that risk if you don't have a deck that's laser focused on protecting something. And there are some cards in black, but it would probably need white or blue alongside it to make it worthwhile. And even if, then this is probably not where you want to focus that power level in your uncommons. So don't fall for this trap. This is not the mutate Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Don't. Lurking Deadeye is a 4-mana 4/2 flash. That's pretty nice. When Lurking Deadeye enters the battlefield, destroy target creature that was dealt damage this turn. Really interesting together with creatures that have first strike, obviously. I would have preferred to have it on a lower casting cost because you're playing this more for the effect than for the creature. Also a bit awkward if you're playing it on the defensive, but I don't really see a scenario currently where this would be amazingly good. Having it be 4 mana really pushes it outside of the aggro decks that want to take advantage of it, and for the more slow control decks, especially the black ones, it's just easier and safer to straight up kill something with a kill spell. Memory Leak, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land from that player's graveyard or hand and exile it. So this both answers recurring threats, escape, and also can go after cards in the graveyard to exile them, which is really, really strong. And it has cycling in for 1 mana in case all of that isn't relevant. I do expect this to appear in Black Disruption focused decks to complement the rest, and if we see more interactions happening around the graveyard, we see people being more escape focused, this is probably going to reach a point where it might even replace duress as the most popular discard spell. Is that going to happen? Probably not, since, well, we have more incentive to go self-mill into advantage. So if you're tired of losing to Uro, this gets rid of it. That's all I'm saying. Mutual Destruction is a 1 mana sorcery. It has flash as long as you control a permanent with flash, and as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature to destroy target creature as a common. There is a blue-black flash theme in this set, but adding blue-black flash with sacrifice fodder in order to make this good enough just stretches your deck way too far. The good part about having flash is that whenever you get to keep counter mana up, and whenever your opponent does something that you don't care about, you get to flash in a creature instead. But that creature needs to be good enough to be relevant, so it needs to be able to present a clock, have some evasion. It won't be something that you then carelessly throw away to 2-for-1 yourself to get rid of your opponent's creature. So I think that kind of deck will be too stressed, so that getting that flash up is going to be too hard. And if it's going to be a sorcery spell that requires you to sack a creature to destroy something, then Spark Harvest is just 10 times better. So I don't really see this being played. Mythos of Nassau is a 3 mana instant. Destroy target non-land permanent if it's a creature, or if green and white was spent to cast this spell. So if you pay black, green, white for it, it destroys a non-land permanent. Rares and Mythics have a certain role and expectation in Gentry where they are supposed to put a lot of pressure on your opponent, and be game finishing entities in your deck. Have you playing a rare as one of your answers is awkward in that regard, even if it has the ultimate level of flexibility. So I don't think people will want to play this. It's good for sure, but I don't think it's good enough. This at uncommon would be broken. Night Squad Commando is a 3 mana 2/3. When Night Squad Commando enters the battlefield, if you attack this turn, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. In that black-white humans deck, because this is a human itself, this is 2 humans for 1 card. I do expect that this might be one of those filler cards that you need to reach a 60-card deck in black-white humans in Gentry. The power level is acceptable. In other Gentry metagames, we have been playing 3 mana 2/2s that bring a little friend along. Having the raid, the fact that you need to have attack this turn, makes that less certain, but it's also the deck where you might just throw a 1/1 under the bus to get another one and get advantage of the die trigger of the one that died before it. So that really upgrades what this card can do. I think this will be played as a filler. if the black-white humans deck, either the sacrifice theme or the aggro theme becomes a thing, it'll be having this card. Serrated Scorpion is a 1-mana 1/2. When it dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life as common. For starts, this is a really strong card against mono red and token decks. Obviously, that 1 power and 2 toughness is really strong. There are also people that are looking at freely recurring and sacrificing this as a sort of super cat. So we are going to see this card. Worst case scenario, it's going to come out the sideboard to fight mono red decks. It complements the Gary, the Grey Merchant of Asphodel decks really well. And if you have that cycle of recursion set up, then it could be a finishing card all of its own. Suffocating Fumes is a 3-mana common instant. Creatures your opponents control gets -1/-1 until end of turn with cycling 2. So we've already said that tokens decks might become more relevant at this point. There is incentive to go wide in white. There is a human token theme, and we're already dealing with fairies from Improbable Alliance in Gentry, where it doesn't really matter if you give them -2/-2 with Cry of the Carnarium, or you're playing something that gives them -1/-1. This has the extra advantage that it is an instant, so you can reply to the all creatures get +2/+2 that your opponent is playing with it, and go for the double, triple, quadruple blowout. And it has cycling to, if you find out you don't need it, get something else instead. I totally expect to see this in control sideboards from time to time, if they want more than just the Cry of the Carnarium that they currently are playing. Unbreakable Bonds, 5-mana uncommon sorcery. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a lifelink counter on it. For 5 mana, this I fear is too costly an effect. Getting that lifelink counter just doesn't really seem worth it. At 5 mana, it's barely a discount on getting one of the bigger creatures. Putting lifelink on it is interesting. It gives you more comeback potential, but that means that you're already resolving and keeping your big creature, which should be enough reason to win on its own. So I don't expect people to be investing in this. Unexpected Fangs puts a +1/+1 counter and a lifelink counter on target creature. I do expect this one to be played in some decks. Giving a counter and lifelink, giving the counter makes it a combat trick, in that a trade becomes a win, and the lifelink counter makes racing whatever is going on really hard to catch up with. So I do think this will be played. It might be out of the side, but if you're playing that mono black life gain deck, then this might be in your main deck as well. Unlikely Aid is a 2-mana common instant that gives target creature +2/+0 and indestructible until end of turn. This is the black protection spell. If you are planning on building any kind of deck now that wants to make a big threat and protect it, you already had Unlikely 8 because it was already in War of the Spark and features subjectively better art. So it's a reprint and nobody's really using it now, so I don't expect it to be used in the future unless that mono black life gain deck becomes a thing. Void Beckoner is a 8 mana 8/8 Death Touch. That's irrelevant. Anything in 8/8 touches is probably dead anyway. That has cycling 3. Whenever you cycle, put a Death Touch counter on target creature you control. If I want to be putting Death Touch counters on creatures I control, they're probably smaller and have abilities like a Mayhem Devil. And I'm probably more likely to have that on that reanimation spell. So I don't think this is ever going to be relevant in Gentry. One point of attention though is giving Death Touch to a creature with Trample allows it to assign just 1 damage to blockers and all the rest to opponents. So that's the one scenario in which this might be somewhat relevant. If you have like a black-green ramp deck, you could both play this and take advantage really well of that cycling. Another one is combining it with first or double strike, so you kill anything with first strike. Whisper Squad is a 1 mana 1/1 common. For 2 mana you get to search your library, for a card named Whisper Squad, put it into the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. This seems underwhelming, but don't forget that this is in many cases a cheaper, smaller Sanitorum Skeleton. Instead of 4 mana to get 1 back, you're paying 2 mana to get another one. The number of times where you're recycling a card like Sanitorum Skeleton more than 3 times is rare and probably unnecessary, and you're not going wider with it. It's that same permanent coming back over and over and over again. So I know this card felt underwhelming to me, but if you have a sacrifice theme in your deck, or a way to that wants a lot of fodder, paying 2-3 times to get free sacrifice permanents is pretty nice. And then we have Zag of Mamba. It's a 1 mana 1/1 uncommon. Whenever this creature mutates, target creature an opponent controls gets -2/-2 until end of turn. This is an uncommon. As a 1/1, it's hugely underwhelming. As far as I know, all the more interesting mutate cards start getting there at 3 mana. This interacts really favorably with a lot of the weenie decks once it does get mutated, but before that it's your setup. So I don't think this is good enough because it attacks only a single type of deck, but if you manage to find a shell that has all the black mutate cards, which means you get to make them discard, you get to make them sacrifice creatures, then it might be really interesting to be able to kill a small creature and then make them sacrifice something else on top of that. Because when you mutate, if there's multiple triggers, you do get to stack them in the order that you like. You get to kill something before they choose what they're sacrificing. But that's already 2 uncommons in your deck, of which one doesn't really do anything against control decks. So be careful for that trap where you're putting cards in your main deck, and usually you want to have most of your uncommons in your main deck that are near dead against certain decks. If you liked the video you just saw, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and check out the other episodes in this set review.